Hi, welcome to uh, the first lecture after the introduction of the Marxian economics course. In this lecture, actually, I am connecting two different topics, which, when time allows, I am covering in two different lectures. But usually, I'm also open to the questions. So, since in this class there are no one can possibly ask questions, I decided to connect them into one topic, and that topic is scientific and philosophical foundations of Marxian economics, where we will look basically how the economics before Marx has developed, which lay foundations of Marxian economics, as well as the Marxian philosophy, which has a special name called dialectical materialism. Sometimes also, you might have heard dialectic, historical materialism, basically. And I will explain both of the meaning of both of them, and I will also briefly mention how Marxian philosophy affects the Marxian science, Marxian economics in particular. So this picture is basically, I usually put it to the scientific foundation part, and this is for the philosophical foundation part. In the lectures we will see later, I might also talk on how philosophical foundations of Marxian economics affects the economic view of Marx, basically the economic theories of Marx, basically. But let's continue. I have already mentioned in the introduction, but let me just remind you again. For Marx, economics is the substructure, which means actually the particular structure which is more critical, or which has more determining power. A substructure is like the biology of the society. I mean, it determines, it basically lays foundations of basic functions, basic rules, basic processes in society, which makes the society survive physically and biologically, basically. So any other system in the society should obey the limits of this substructure. Other characteristics of the society, like culture, religion, politics, might be important, and they might also affect the way substructure evolved. But in the end, at any point in time, substructure has determining power over them. Superstructure, I mean the structure above the substructure. Superstructure cannot contradict the major elements of the substructure. It is like, I mean, in the end, we can only run as fast as our body allows. I mean, we might like running, we might have different hobbies, we might have different characters, but in the end, our biological limits puts also limits on how our character can develop, or how our, let me say, jobs can be defined. For example, individually, what kind of a parent or family we can have is also defined by our biological limits. Of course, our character and our jobs, our family relations also affect our biology, certainly. But in the end, biology was putting the ultimate limits, because if it doesn't function, then we cannot physically exist, and any other thing that won't matter. And substructure does not point any particular individual or class, even anyone in society. Actually, everyone, you can also say, plays with certain acts and functions. and even in some cases, certain aspects of its functions play a role in play a role in the substructure, or defines his or her role in substructure, and in other aspects of his actions, or other actions he or she performs, might also play a role in political structure or culture of the society. For example, when someone buys jeans, that's at the same time a cultural choice. I mean, you choose how to dress yourself, which is part of the culture, but it's also an economic choice, because you basically do an action which is serving to certain need. Clothing you have, basically. In that sense, it is an economic function. You are putting an action which is meeting a need of you, and it is part of the greater social network, which is actually your buying action is part of greater chain of actions, which is providing your need, and the action when you do the buying, it also has an effect on the other actions in that chain. It also affects the decision-making process of the factory owner and the farmer who is producing raw materials of the of your clothing, etc., etc. So this is clear. Now we can go. We can start looking to the history of the economics, and here I'm pretty much. I will actually focus on three particular figures. Although before these three particular figures, there is an important group which is called psychocrats. If you are interested, you can look to them. They are actually putting especially more emphasis on the farmers, and they actually show that first, I mean, this group of farmers who are meeting most of their additional needs, like clothing themselves. I mean, they weave their own clothing, they build their own houses, and in cities there are other professions, but all these professions can only exist if the farmers have a surplus product. So they especially point out this fact. I mean, the importance of the agriculture and land. Although in many ways we can say, I mean, Adam Smith, later in the same century, when he develops his own economic theory, he kind of, I mean, he superseded previous economists, early economists, and he kind of created the core, I mean, the foundation of the current economics itself. All of the schools in economics kind of has its foundations in Adam Smith, so that's why it's important, especially. Well, Adam Smith, and as well as these early year economists, they started to develop in 18th century. And actually, when you look to the sciences in general, they started to develop in 16th century. With well, astronomy is especially a field where these rules and laws were started to develop actually even earlier, and kind of this early astronomical rules and laws give, you might say, some inspiration to the more general laws in physics, how objects behave. For example, I mean, for example, two objects, they always accelerate with the Earth always pulls them with the same speed, for example, or they move according to the same rule. So motion of the objects, at least at macro level, can be explained with a single formula, and all physical objects move according to this single formula. So this actually has created an interesting framework for the people of the time. Nature apparently was obeying certain rules, and actually the actions that doesn't seem to obey a particular order were actually obeying to certain rules, or were actually behaving orderly. Well, this has a very wide philosophical discussions how this order is where this order is coming from, and what does it mean that we have an orderly universe, physical universe. But in time, scientists try to find similar rules every, rules that every agent obeys in different fields, like chemistry, where the atoms or molecules obey certain rules, or biology, basically, and later also in social sciences. Well, social sciences might be a little bit interesting, because at first you might think that social sciences, well, in societies there are rules. They are either obeyed or not obeyed, and when the people obey to those rules can be discussed. But, well, independent of the people who are making those rules, independent of people's, conscious will and, statement that I will obey to this rule, social scientists, taught or tried to found certain rules that are obeyed almost automatically, instinctively. Of course, they are not obeyed independent of human characteristics, but characteristics that exist in all humans should make them obey these rules, even if they did not explicitly decide to obey these rules. So certain characteristics and certain aspects of this the society that are not necessarily consciously built, or what is the effect of certain, let's say, what is the effect of the structures or rules that are consciously built in the society. All of these things started to be discussed in 18th century. Well, in economics especially, the idea that there are certain rules which are putting economic system into order independent of any person who is making or controlling, checking these rules. Checking everyone and making sure that these rules are obeyed. That's something people, early economists were really very much interested in. What's happening in the economics when no one is setting any particular, no one is actually regulating the economy, and everyone is just acting individually for their own individual interests. And the three major figures basically pretty much lay foundations of the study of economics under such conditions, when there is no regulation, and when actually individuals are acting according to their own interests. So Adam Smith is pretty much the founder of the economics, as I said, as we know it today. David Ricardo and Malthus are two people who, actually Ricardo is the more dominant one, but Malthus is a secondary person, whose discussions has also significantly shapes the way we understand economics. I will continue in the next parts.